Good evening, welcome to This Week in Turkey. Tonight we'll be speaking about the recent performance of the Turkish economy with Mr. Atilla Yeşilada. Welcome.
Nice to be here.
Who is a Turkish economist and also a Turkey analyst at Global Source Partners. We first have a video to watch on the recent performance of the Turkish economy. We'll watch it and then we'll be back in the studio shortly.
In the third quarter of last year, the Turkish economy contracted by 1.8%. The Turkish government put into practice certain mechanisms to boost growth in order to prevent further shrinking in the economy. The government cut special consumption taxes, extended value-added tax cuts on property acquisitions, and introduced debt relief. It has raised the volume of its credit guarantee fund to a total of 250 billion liras to compensate for non-performing loans obtained by small and medium enterprises. The government is also currently working on a plan to allow commercial lenders to securitize and sell their outstanding loans to investors. These tools have been criticized for not being sustainable and long-term solutions to the Turkish economy's structural problems. These provisions helped the economy to grow by 3.5% in the fourth quarter, putting the overall growth rate for 2016 at 2.9%. Now, let's have a look at other macroeconomic indicators of the Turkish economy. The Turkish Statistical Institute announced the unemployment rate in December as 12.7%. In order to restrain the rising unemployment rate, which has been on the rise since 2012, the government encouraged companies to hire by using the unemployment fund. Currently, the inflation rate is at 11.87%, reaching its highest level in 9 years. This year, the central bank set its inflation rate target to 5%. However, the bank has announced that its expectation is 8.5%. Last year, the current account deficit was $32.6 billion, amounting to 3.8% of the annual GDP, and the budget deficit was $29.3 billion, amounting to 1.1% of the GDP. As a tool to set the interest rate, the Central Bank of Turkey uses the late liquidity window lending rate, which normally is used under extraordinary circumstances. The bank does not touch the overnight lending and borrowing rates as a result of the political pressure exercised by the government. Now, the weighted average cost of the funding is 11.5%, causing the market interest rates to increase as well. In the last 3 years, the Turkish lira has witnessed a sharp fall against the US dollar, reaching to a $3.94 low on January. After a period of frequent fluctuation in the beginning of 2017, the dollar-lira parity is now being traded at 3.58. This appreciation of the Turkish lira is compatible with a global trend observed in countries with a similar economic performance. Alongside India, Indonesia, Brazil, and South Africa, Turkey is cited among 5 developing countries, titled the Fragile Five, with fragile economies due to high external funding needs and high borrowing costs. The currencies of all 5 countries have gained value in the last few months, yet the Turkish lira is still the most weak currency among its peers. This month, the European Central Bank and the Fed will announce their monetary policies for the second half of the year. Shortly after these 2 important meetings, the Central Bank of Turkey will announce its interest rate decision.
Welcome back, Mr. Yeşilada.
It's my pleasure.
So, as you know, the Turkish economy suffered a negative growth rate in the third quarter of last year, namely 2016. But it's currently showing signs of recovery, mainly thanks to a number of measures, most visibly, such as the Credit Guarantee Fund, which was increased in size significantly recently, and the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which was again established only very recently. We've also seen that the markets reacted quite positively to the result of last month's referendum. My question to you is, how useful do you think are these measures for Turkey to meet its goals for a sustainable growth?
Allow me first to describe the breadth and the width of the recovery. It's quite robust, actually. In the first 5 months of the year, we have seen exports recover 10% in dollar terms year on year, which is pretty good, at par with China, I would say. Tourism, in terms of tourist arrivals, is also bouncing back from a disastrous 2016, but revenues are fairly weak. Industrial production, in particular manufacturing, has really surprised me. The PMI index collected by Istanbul Chamber of Industry and Market, has reached levels not seen since 2013, which is extremely good. On the consumption side, the jury is still out. Obviously, in items where the government has declared tax cuts, such as, refrigerators, washing machines, and furniture, sales are robust, but we don't see a widespread consumption boom, despite the credit measures that you have described. But all the sentiment indices do prove to us that there is an improvement. As you have said, one of the main impetus behind the recovery is this credit guarantee fund, which has allowed many medium and small-sized companies to survive the credit crunch and the lack of collateral. The second aspect of the recovery is the fiscal stimulus. Over the last 12 months, the budget deficit to GDP ratio rose to 2%, which is still small compared to many nations, but it's a record over the last 4 years or so, and that despite tax amnesties, which yielded roughly 20 billion lira. So without those, the deficit would have been very high. In our view, the recovery is good, but it's very unlikely to last because it's not self-sustaining. The disposable income of the households is not increasing. It's being eaten up by inflation, and employment gains are very weak. The only employment created is thanks to Mr. Erdogan's national employment campaign, and the wages are extremely low. On the credit side, a lot of corporations that received this credit guarantee fund guaranteed loans have simply restructured their outstanding loans. There are rumors, which we can't verify, but have heard from many bankers that the proceeds have been used either to purchase FX in lieu of upcoming payments, or even flats and cars for the benefit of the leading shareholders. In summary, we can't guarantee that this credit impetus or credit momentum will translate into a fixed investment boom, which is what is needed for the Turkish economy to become self-sustaining. To make a long story short, we think unless new fiscal or monetary measures are introduced, the current economic boom will peter off at the end of the third quarter. If global conditions, which are currently extremely advantageous for countries like Turkey, remain lax or loose, the economic recovery may last for another quarter or so. But at the end, in 2018, Turkish locomotive will slow down, and we will need another approach.
Mm-hmm. My next question is a more general one in comparison to my previous one. Do you think that the July 15th coup attempt, do you think this had an observable effect on the performance of the Turkish economy?
Yes, observable, definitely. But the observable part is not that important. I think the psychological impact and the institutional devastation it has wreaked is just starting to show up, and it will last for many years. Observable, clearly, you look at the consumer confidence and real sector or business confidence indices, they went down sharply, and Turkish GDP became negative in the third quarter of last year, as you have said. Several companies have been taken over on allegations of supporting Gülen. Their employment went down. Roughly, in my calculation, 300,000 people have been processed, which means sacked, dismissed, put in prison, or investigated to the point that they have been shunned by their employers or friends. So there has been a massive employment loss as well. The invisible effects are just showing up. For instance, the chairman of TÜSİAD, Erol Bilecik, I believe, I'm not very good with names, recently warned the government that as long as the state of emergency is in effect, foreign direct investment is not very likely to re-enter Turkey. And this is the comment I hear from many of my contacts as well. The suspension of basic rules of law and liberties makes those people who would build factories in Turkey and employ people extremely reluctant to invest money in Turkey. But the biggest impact, in my view, is the destruction of institutional quality and capacity. The judiciary has been devastated, and the people who replaced those who have been sacked are cronies of AKP. Even if they weren't, they are fresh graduates out of school, and their capacity to handle felony cases or complicated financial and commercial cases is in doubt. This destruction of capacity is not limited to the judiciary. You see it in all the ministries. Central Bank of Turkey had many Gülenists, Capital Markets Board of Turkey, the Treasury. I don't want to be misunderstood. I fully support the Gülenist purge. Gülenists are the biggest enemies of Turkey. But the fact that we're doing so without any due process or judicial review suggests to me that many people who are innocent are wrongly accused and being dismissed from their jobs. And we are not using a merit-based system to recruit new ones to fill their places. Turkish bureaucracy has never been, a properly functioning institution. Now, unfortunately, with Gülenists or alleged Gülenists gone, and the new recruits selected on the basis of party loyalty, I'm afraid Turkey's ability to govern itself is going to decline precipitously, which is going to impact on growth and development.
Mm-hmm. Let's now move our focus on the external developments that are expected to happen soon. Several important meetings are scheduled for this month, namely those of the ECB, the Turkish Central Bank, and the Fed. And another important development that's likely to happen within this month of June is a possible reshuffling of the Turkish cabinet. So how do you think these developments may have an effect on the performance of the Turkish economy?
Let's start dispensing the one which is the least important, the ECB meeting. The Eurozone or EU economic growth has surpassed expectations, and I don't see any immediate downside threats to it. But inflation is still very low. Core is 0.9% the last time I looked at it. And Draghi, despite objections from the hawkish members of the Monetary Policy Council, is going to stay the course with extremely loose monetary policy. That is good for Turkey because credit growth and monetary expansion spills over the borders and allows us to finance our external deficit. So it's not, he's not going to change his stance, and it's not going to affect Turkey. Despite today's poorer than expected non-farm payrolls data, Fed is going to raise interest rates in June meeting, FOMC meeting, which is fully priced. So it shouldn't really raise the value of the dollar or hurt the Turkish lira. What the market doesn't want to accept is that Fed is also going to raise interest rates in September and then is going to start to run off, that is to reduce its balance sheet. Investors stubbornly refuse to see that this is financial tightening, and countries like Turkey, who are extremely reliable on foreign credit, are going to be hurt by this process. So Fed right now, no big problem, but towards the end of the year and 2018, a major menace to Turkish financial stability. The opinions differ on what the central bank will do later in the month when it meets. On Monday, we'll receive the May inflation data, which will show that the year-on-year headline has declined from 12-something to 11-something. The worst of the inflation fear is past us or behind us. I admit that. Thanks to summer and a plentiful harvest, as well as a stable currency, we'll see inflation declining towards 10%, but that's the limit. Prudence suggests that central bank should stick to an extremely tight monetary policy to push inflation down towards its target of 5%. But it's quite possible that at the behest of the government, And to help stimulate the economy further, central bank might slowly reduce its key interest rate. I don't want to get too technical with our audience, but it's the effective funding rate. So I don't expect a major policy announcement from central bank, but if the currency remains stable, after the Fed decision, after central bank reviews how the markets react to Fed decision, it's quite possible that central bank begins experimenting by lower effective interest rates. And I don't think this policy is going to be harmful to the exchange rate over the summer months, but clearly we won't be able to fight the inflation. And again, by autumn or so, lower interest rates could lead to further volatility in the Turkish lira.
And what do you think the markets will be looking out for throughout June?
Currently, it's my belief that the markets are experiencing an episode of what I think, not Bernanke, but Greenspan described as irrational exuberance. A state of mania where market pricing is detached from fundamental realities. Over the last 12 months, major central banks printed $1.8 trillion, which needs to find returns. Investors have become extremely careless about risk. They are investing everywhere. They are not becoming selective. And I don't think this is going to change in the short run. So I think not only over the next month, but over the next 3 months, money will flow in the direction of countries like Turkey. I mean, for Christ's sake, money is flowing into Brazil, which is a bankrupt and a corrupt country. Why not Turkey? I can criticize many things about Turkey, but we're better off than Brazil. The way investors view it is they're agnostic about Erdogan and Turkish politics, political stability. Economy is growing, and they're not going to question beyond the headlines. So I anticipate the stock exchange exceeding 100,000 points, probably another 10% rally. Turkish bond yields declining another 100 basis points or so. And Turkish lira, probably dollar TL exchange rate, probably somewhere around 3.4 or so. But we got to remember, markets are not reflective of an economy's true conditions. And in the past, such rapid entry of what we call hot money has, in most cases, also led to rapid exit of hot money, which devastated the system. So this is not necessarily a good thing. As I've said, in my view, Turkey will have a very easy summer. But in the fall, as economic growth slows down and people start talking about early elections, the situation will change. A lot of emphasis has been placed on cabinet change. I disagree with that. I don't think the cabinet change will signal major policy changes. Erdogan will probably just replace ministers who didn't perform well in the referendum campaign, or those whose loyalties are suspect. I do subscribe to the theory that if we get a very comprehensive cabinet reshuffle, that might mean that he's preparing for early elections. But it's my view that Erdogan has been sold the view by his strategists that Turkish growth rate can be accelerated and permanently sustained at 6%, which would win him a huge victory in 2019 elections. Until reality proves him wrong, he's not going to call early elections.
Well, your second last remark actually brings me to my final question. Your second last remark being the one about Brazil.
I don't remember any of them, so go ahead, please do.
No problem, you'll remember in a minute. As you know, Turkey is cited among the fragile 5 economies. This was originally a term coined by a Morgan Stanley analyst to describe those emerging economies who are increasingly reliant on foreign investment to finance their growth ambitions. And these countries include, alongside Turkey, India, Brazil, Indonesia, and South Africa. So how do you think Turkey is performing in comparison with these other fragile countries?
Actually, I think, not that I'm an expert on Indonesia, but I'm fairly sure India is no longer fragile. Under Modi, it has reformed somewhat. But I think South Africa, Brazil, and Turkey are still basket cases. In South Africa and Brazil, the issues are growth and political corruption, which is very difficult to heal. In Turkey, we simply live in Alice in the Wonderland. I think sociologists should study whether an entire nation can hallucinate. Because what we think we are and what we actually are just so completely different from each other. It surprises me. I feel like I'm Neo in the movie Matrix. I really can't distinguish whether the reality is as AKP describes it or whether I'm in a dream. The fact is that we have huge current account deficits, which led to a buildup of debt, but no exports or technological improvement. This debt can't be paid off, I'm sorry. As if this is not enough, we continue encouraging further leverage. We keep telling corporations, borrow more, borrow more, borrow more. But Turkish savings rate is one of the lowest in the emerging markets. So Turkish savings have been completely tapped up. We want investment, but Turkish deposit rates are going up sharply, which means credit will not become affordable soon. So how are we going to sustain this growth? How are we going to pay back these loans, both domestic and external? How are we going to finance our current account deficit? Are questions that are not even being asked in Ankara. So we're extremely fragile. Turkey is being kept alive by the fact that inflation just refused to make an entry on the world stage. And major reserve banks, reserve money banks like Fed and ECB have been extremely lenient to world markets. I think ECB is going to stay on that loose path for another year or so. But as I've said, Fed is tightening, which is going to make the job very difficult for Turkey. At the very end, we're running out of tricks. Even if the government is shoving down credit down the throats of corporates and consumers, they simply cannot swallow it anymore. Simply because there are no opportunities for investment or spending in Turkey. This growth model essentially has outlived its shelf life. It has expired. And I think by the end of 2017, we'll see that, and either AKP will have to find new tricks or call elections.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Mr. Yeşilada, for your comments and for being with us in the studio
It's
tonight.
my pleasure.
We'll continue with our next news video. The trials of the 221 suspected coup plotters began in Ankara on May 22nd. The hearings continue amid heavy security.
The 17th High Criminal Court of Ankara has been conducting hearings in the high-profile case against 221 suspects, including former high-ranking generals accused of perpetrating the coup attempt on July 15. There are 221 main defendants in this trial. 12 of them are on the run, including the US-based cleric Fethullah Gülen, whom Turkey sees as the mastermind of the coup attempt. Some of the defendants include a 4-star general, 3 lieutenant generals, 4 major generals. The main defendants are the former Air Force commander, General Akın Öztürk, and other alleged members of the so-called Peace at Home Council, a group on whose behalf a coup declaration was read on the television at the time of the uprising. Authorities are seeking life sentences for the defendants on charges of attempting to assassinate the president, killing 249 people, attempting to kill 2,735 people, and restricting the freedoms of high-level commanders and state officials. Hearings at the trial are expected to last until June 16. The defendants could face life imprisonment if found guilty. Meanwhile, a report prepared by a parliamentary panel tasked with probing the coup attempt has determined that the Fethullah's terror organization was definitely behind the coup attempt, while also noting that there was a general intelligence failure in preventing the coup attempt. The main opposition party, CHP, members also criticized the publication of the report, saying that opposition members were given a very limited time to review the draft, and the preparation was organized by AKP members. The report of the panel did not include the responses of the Chief of General Staff Hulusi Akar to the questions of the parliamentary panel. Akar submitted his response to questions posed by the panel in a written statement on May 30th. Akar said in his response that he stood against the coup attempt from the moment it began and also took immediate measures against it. He noticed that he had urged the coup plotters to immediately cease their attempt. Akar also said, "It is out of the question that we didn't realize the existence of FETÖ. We, of course, realized it and even described it as the highest level of risk." He said the armed forces had taken every possible precaution and made every effort to remove traitors from within the army. The opposition criticized him for not participating in the panel discussions while the commission was conducting its investigation. The responses are also criticized on the grounds that they didn't reveal anything unknown. There is an 8-page statement, but it contains nothing serious or worthwhile. They are unserious answers to a deeply serious situation, said CHP spokesperson Bülent Tezcan. 249 people, many of them civilians, were killed in the failed coup on July 15, 2016, when a group of soldiers commandeered tanks, warplanes and helicopters, bombing the parliament and attempting to overthrow the government. 24 coup plotters were also killed on the night. Suspected US-based cleric Fethullah Gülen denies his involvement.
Iraqi state-backed Shiite Hashd al-Shabi paramilitary launched a fresh military campaign named Shingal Martyrs. A number of villages in the Shingal region were retaken on May 25th, including the Yazidi village of Kocho, the symbol of ISIS atrocities.
Operation Shingal Martyrs aims to control western Nihav's contested areas like Karavan and Bash to eventually reach Syria's border, said Abu Mahdi Mundis, the deputy head of the Hashd al-Shabi board, in a statement. He added that many villages were retaken and some areas have already been besieged. This is the second phase of the wide-scale Operation Muhammad Resulullah to retake the remaining areas from ISIS militants in the Shingal region. The statement added the advancing Shia fighters were able to control Limia village in western Karavan, to besiege Maliha village and to cut off the Hatamiya-Kosher road in northern Karavan, which they described as an important supply line to ISIS militants. It added that ISIS held villages of Arfia in northern Kabba Wahbi and northwest Bahaj were reclaimed, and now Hashd has reached the Domes complex and cut the main Shingal Bahaj road. Since the launch of the fresh campaign, ISIS has suffered material damages as a number of car bombs were destroyed in Hatamiya village, according to the report of Burada news agency's Ayub Nasri. Iraqi fighter jets also repeatedly destroyed 3 car bombs in Kosher village. Earlier this week, the Hashd declared it had brought under control nearby Karavan 2 weeks after the start of its operations.
According to a report by Reuters, the talks between the heads of EU institutions and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan were held in an amicable atmosphere, but produced no new agreements.
On Tuesday, Reuters reported, relying on officials in Brussels, that the talks last week between the heads of the EU institutions and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan were held in a good atmosphere but produced no new agreements. Last week, President Erdogan had stated, following the meeting, that he had been presented with a new 12-month timetable regarding the accession process. Meanwhile, reports published by German daily Die Welt suggest that 18 EU countries have attempted to block next year's NATO Leaders Summit from taking place in Turkey. We got a 12-month calendar from them about the studies they made. We will make a study on this calendar with the Foreign Ministry and the EU Ministry, President Erdogan had said after the meeting with European Council President Donald Tusk and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker last week in Brussels. However, according to Reuters, senior EU officials stated this week that although there exists a list of meetings to be held with Turkey, no formal deadlines were set during the meeting. Adding that an improvement in the bilateral relations depend on Erdogan resolving at least some of the many points of tension. Such tensions include EU's worries on Turkey's anti-terror laws, the treatment of the Kurds, the media and academics, and Erdogan assuming more power after the presidential referendum. Nevertheless, despite the ongoing tension between Turkey and the EU, the Union requests the help of Turkey on key issues such as migration and the conflict in Syria. In response to a question on whether the EU was looking to working more closely with Turkey after the recent talks, Reuters reported one source saying, "We have no choice." EU leaders are expected to discuss the relations with Turkey in Brussels on June 22nd and 23rd. Meanwhile, German daily Die Welt reported that 18 EU countries and Canada agreed to prevent next year's NATO summit from taking place in Turkey. Die Welt quoted a high-ranking NATO diplomat stating, "We do not want to enhance Turkey's international credentials, and we want to avoid the impression that NATO supports the Turkish government's internal policy." Turkey had offered to host the NATO leaders' 2018 summit in Istanbul during the 2016 meeting in Warsaw. NATO defense ministers are expected to make a final decision in their meeting in June.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan spoke at the parliamentary group meeting of his party for the first time after being re-elected as the chairman of the Justice and Development Party.
Çiçeklerle hoş geçin.
After the constitutional amendment was approved with the April 16 referendum, Erdogan became the new chairman of the party at the AKP's third extraordinary Grand Congress, held on May 21st. On Tuesday, Erdogan joined the group meeting as the chairman of the party again, after 1,044 days. Special security measures were taken for President Erdogan's speech at the AKP group meeting. The demands of the presidential guards to evacuate the hall before the speech were met with reaction by the councillors of the AKP parliamentary members. Deputies and their councillors protested with applause when the announcement was made to completely empty the hall. In his speech, Erdogan described AKP as a revolutionary party and claimed that it is the party that brought democracy and prosperity to Turkey. He also announced that the party will make changes in provincial, district and town governments. There is a mental fatigue in the party. We need to prepare for 2019 with a much more dynamic, much more vigorous team, Erdogan said. Moreover, he gave important messages about the FETÖ case and reacted to the government that have accepted FETÖ suspects into their countries. I call out to the world, if you refuse to return him, tomorrow you will not get what you want from us, if we have it, Erdogan said.
On the 33rd week of Spor Toto Super League, Beşiktaş announced its championship after beating Gaziantepspor with 4 goals.
On Sunday, Beşiktaş announced its championship 1 week to the end of the league, after winning the match against Gaziantepspor by 4-0. The goals of Babel, Oğuzhan and Talisca brought Beşiktaş the victory and the championship. By winning the 15th championship in its history, Beşiktaş put the 3rd star on its jersey. Moreover, this was the 2nd championship that Beşiktaş, led by Şenol Güneş, won consecutively. Since victory of the game would mean a championship, Beşiktaş fans flocked to the southeastern city. After the victory, fans of Beşiktaş all over the country poured into the streets and celebrated the championship with flags and torches until the morning. On the other hand, by gaining a victory against Medipol Başakşehir with penalties, Konyaspor won the 55th Ziraat Turkish Cup. With this result, Konyaspor gained the right to go to the UEFA Europa League for the 2nd time in a row. The game was stopped for almost 10 minutes because of the tension and violence between the fans on the stands. After the last penalty goal of Skubic, Thousands of Konyaspor fans entered the field from the stands and celebrated the championship by hugging the football players.
Now we'll have a look at what's on in Istanbul next week.
On view today until 13 August 2017, Art Our Presence Ways of Seeing, an international group exhibition created by Sam Bardui and Tilfeldraht, founders of the multidisciplinary curatorial platform Art Reoriented and co-chairman of the Mont Blanc Cultural Foundation, taking its cue from John Berger's 1972 groundbreaking text on visual culture. The eponymous exhibition explores the various formalistic strategies that artists employ to reconfigure our perception of the world. Ways of Seeing brings together 33 artists, a majority of whom will be exhibited for the first time in Turkey. The exhibition consists of 70 works ranging from 1000 BC to the present and spanning a variety of medias from painting, sculpture and photography to sound, film and installation. Peyote Cennet Bahçesi opens its doors tomorrow at noon in Burgazada. Gevende and Kim Kyo will be performing from 6 p.m. onwards. Burgazada will host many local indie musicians during the summer such as Jacuzzi Büyük Ev Abluka'da, İnsanlar Gaye Su Akyol. The entrance fee is 35 Turkish liras. You can reach the island from Istanbul by ferry. Don't forget, last ferry leaves at midnight. Before going on its 2-month summer break, Istanbul Modern Cinema presents a best-of program from this year's World Festivals. Comprised of the latest productions of established contemporary art film directors, the selection includes Olivier Assayas's Personal Shopper, which won the award for Best Director at the 2016 Cannes Film Festival. Personal Shopper is a bold movie with its enigmatic and suspenseful screenplay and captivating performance by Kristen Stewart, the first American actress to have won a César, the French equivalent of the Oscars. You can watch Personal Shopper at 3 p.m. tomorrow. And if you didn't watch it yet, Jim Jarmusch's latest film, Patterson, will be on screening at 1 p.m. on Sunday. Patterson was a nominee for the Golden Palm in last year's Cannes Film Festival.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 9 p.m. Bye.